Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the RC West Oversight Hybrid Committee meeting on today, May 25th. I'm Chris Hoffman, Chair for the RC West. Here with me is Chris Sanford as well, from the Vice Chair. Just a couple housekeeping reminders. This call is being recorded for informational and convenience purposes. Please request permission from RC West before reprinting any related transcripts, and materials are related to the RC West Oversight Committee meeting are available on kaiso.com. Stay informed, RC West. If you're connected to the audio through your computer or use the call me option, select the raise hand icon located at the bottom of your screen, and then #2 only works if you're dialed into the meeting. Please remember to state your name and affiliation before making your comment. If you need technical assistance during the meeting, please send a chat to the event producer, and you may also send your question via chat to either Yelena or any of the other panelists. And with that, just a quick overview here. We aren't going to do roll call today, but we'll touch on the Oversight Committee business, RC West operations update, the working group updates, and then future agenda items. And then we'll open for public comment. That will end, after that will end the public session adjournment. The reason we're not doing roll call today is we don't have anything that's going to require a quorum. So moving right into the Oversight Committee business, I don't believe we have anything. Tricia, is that, or John? Nothing? Okay. So let's move right into the RC West operations update. And I think, John, you're up.
Yep, thanks, Chris. I'd like to second Chris's welcome to this meeting. The ISO and the RC West do welcome. We thank you for your partnership in this RC West operations, and we value feedback, including any constructive criticism you have. It helps us to be effective in doing our job and to be able to deal with difficult and sometimes contentious issues. Once we've been able to establish a good relationship and have an open forum. So these meetings do provide us an opportunity to discuss some issues that are of a common interest or concern. So I just again want to thank you for joining, and I will now hand it over to Tim Beach.
Thank you, John. Yeah, so we have a brief RC West operations update. It has been sort of a busy spring. You know, we've had a number of weather-related events, but, you know, just sort of highlight, I went back and looked at some of the events and logs since we last met. We had 20 forced outages on 345, 500, and 500 kV equipment. So that's usually, you know, it's a heavy evolution for the RCs. When we get into those outages, they really work on, you know, what new limits may be in effect, recalculating Oregon export IROL, for example, or the Washington import IROL, or any other TTC or interface of our SOLs that we're looking at. So that's fairly, it felt like to me, fairly heavily. I didn't go back and look at previous years, but that's quite a bit. That's in addition to the many, many outages we have scheduled during the shoulder periods or the spring period. So quite a bit of activity. We're in a GMD solar cycle now, so many of you may have been observing or seeing or hearing from your operators of the GMD warnings. And we've had 6 of those this year. Alberta is the GMD monitor for the Western interconnection. We rotate that through all the RCs every year. But we haven't seen any impacts from those. Generally, we would expect impacts first north of the U.S. border into Canada, the 49th parallel into Canada. Potentially, we could see some impacts into the northern area of our RC West area, but since we've been in RC, we haven't seen anything like that. But we continue to monitor it, and it does become a lot of people want to hear about the GMD warnings when we issue them. What we saw, not necessarily those inside the utility or the operations centers, but those regulators and some of the CPUCs or public utility commissions, they're always interested in what's happening there, or, you know, do we see any impacts, that type of thing, because it is broadcast usually on the national news. Like one we heard earlier this spring, You could see the Northern Lights well into the U.S., which was a big event. Of course, that made the news, and we got a number of questions on that. We did have 21 frequency or FTL, frequency trigger level events during this time period. Almost all of those are due to system-wide under generation across the peak as we try to catch up, or the BH try to catch up to the load curve. There was a few of those with related to resource losses, but they all recovered quite quickly. But that's another thing, that when those occur, the RCs are actively looking for the source of that frequency decline and making sure it's being corrected. We do monitor all the ACEs, and we do see a system-wide RC ACE as well as ACEs for BC Hydro, Alberta, and SPP. We had a WEC 1 RAS annual testing completed. So this is done every spring, every year. We did a lot of coordination into this outage. I think this is probably the smoothest implementation or facilitation of that annual testing that occurs. So we take the WEC 1 RAS out, we have to control the COI to a very low number and manage that going forward. So I was very pleased with what I saw from the coordination with BPA, PG&E, APS, the RCs in regards to implementing that across 2 weekends this spring. So for anybody who was involved with that, thank you. Thank you very much for that. We did have a coordinated energy assistance for a BA, which avoided a ENEA this spring as well. On May 1st, GridForce is a new RC West customer, or a return to an RC West. They have a single connection at the Janipa bus with P&M. So they are new to our RC West, although they had previously been a customer at the Inception RC West as well. As many of you know, we had our May 23rd Summer Readiness webinar. It was very actively attended, so I appreciate anybody that contributed to that, and was successful. We will be looking for, probably send a survey later this year, looking for content for next year, and maybe, as John said, any constructive criticism or ideas you have for how we might improve that. And we've completed our annual interconnection reliability operating limit, IROL training as well. So that went well. We do that every year, and it's very important, especially as we get into the summer's months, to be up on our IROL procedures and training. We did have a change to the organ export IROL mitigation, which Samson talked about during the summer readiness audit, which has actually helped quite a bit. So thank you for that. Go to the next slide, please. Just a quick look at our EAs. You'll see this chart. Usually, we almost always include this in any updates I have. But these are the EAs across the last 4 years. This year, we are at 2 EA 3s, which were involved with arming firm load for contingency reserve. So this is what we talked about in the workshop this morning. Again, we set our peak loads last year, 130.9 gigawatts for RC West on September 6th, and then WEC had a historical peak of 167.5 gigawatts as well. Next slide, please. And we'll do the procedure update. I'll take any questions that we may have, either in the chat or we prefer that you raise your hand and ask for them.
No questions in queue.
Okay, we can go to who's up next? Is it Kathy?
Hi, this is Kathy Fernandez. I am going to be covering the procedure updates. What I am showing here is a list of the recently published procedures. There are quite a few procedures listed here over the last couple of months. The RC 9000 open loop guideline procedure, we had some clarifications to one of the sections regarding operating limit for path 66 when one contingency away from open loop and monitoring for potential insecure operating state. We had an annual review for RC 410A, RC 9330, the Path 80 operating guide. We clarified actions and steps for curtailing NWMT schedules and TTC to mitigate congestion on Path 80. Included some mitigation steps and then some other administrative updates there. Annual review for RC 9210, RC 120, RC 120A, we added a data request 682 from discussions with DEWG on 9722 and Joint Cold Weather Task Force update, and then the EOP 11 reference update. We had annual reviews for RC 120 C and B as well. Pretty basic changes. Any questions on this slide?
There are no questions in queue.
Thank you. Can we proceed to the next slide, please? Okay, here, these are just annual reviews continuing. We had a lot that were coming up around the same time, so we updated RC 410, system emergencies, and attachment B on that one for annual review. RC 330 and the attachments on that, that's the coordination with neighboring RCs. All administrative changes there. We updated RC 670A, we updated the Appendix I, removing Luna Unit 3 as requested by PNM. Any changes, or I'm sorry, any questions on this one? Okay, we can proceed to the next slide, please. Okay, continuing on with recently published, we updated RC 9110 for annual review, some minor updates here. Periodic review for the RC West coordination plan. Just some minor updates, resorting alphabetically, corrected a few dates, and updated a procedure title, pretty basic. And then we did update the RC West reliability area map. Then we updated RC 100A. We updated Figure 1 to show new RC North and South boundaries. RC 310A, we changed Section 1.1, changed Path 49 to 46 under the CASI, under CASI per APS request. I guess we had that noted incorrectly. And then we had RC 9550, monitoring heavy east to west flows. We updated the second bullet to include SCE and San Diego, and we updated the last bullet from APS to update 49 to applicable TOPs to adjust there, and then it continued on. That was per APS request. I think that's it for the recently published. Are there any questions to any of those? Okay. Moving on here, these are the upcoming procedure changes. We're updating RC 140, guidelines for sending messages across RC seams. We replaced all Western connection with RC West under operationally affected parties, and then updated BC Hydro to BCRC. RC 460, 460A, B, C, D, E, and F, those are all getting updated for annual review with minor updates. RC 560, we are removing the ERC references and replacing with JIC if we're applicable. We had a change with that. And then we have RC 9030 that is being pushed out to 7.1. That's going to be a major update and reorganization. They're waiting on some internal coordination that needs to take place. So we're targeting 7/1 currently. And then RC 9560, that has a target published date of 6/1 as most of the others, and that's just for periodic review. So mainly administrative change. So that's all I have. Is there any questions on this slide or any of the others? A lot to cover there.
There are no questions in the audio queue.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I think we've got RC metrics up next with Kendall or Raja.
Kendall, are you going to do that, or do you want me to do that?
You can go ahead and do that, Raja. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. This is Raja Tapitobula, Director of Operation Engineering Services here at CAISO RC West. These metrics, again, the quarterly metrics, this slide is generally talking about the state estimation residual errors, right? As you guys are aware, RC West model has the entire footprint, and it's looking at different voltage levels and see what kind of mismatches, residual errors are occurring in real time, and collecting that information, right, and accumulating and showing this. So overall, I mean, in general, it's trying to show, okay, we don't want a huge anomalous on every equipment. It doesn't, because it's combining everything, it doesn't show what the major issue is. But overall, that we do monitor that in real time. We do monitor, we do have processes in real time to monitor those and address those before a solution issue becomes a major issue, right? That's our responsibility. So again, this slide is talking in general, overall looks like March, January, February, March, a pretty same level. Nothing pops out that says a major model issue is occurring. Next slide, please. And this one, it's a real-time state estimation contingency analysis, right? Typically capturing the non-converged contingencies. What do we mean by if the RTCA is not solving, right, is not solving on a particular contingency, and that will be captured part of this, right? In general, we are looking for, are there any a lot of non-convergence issues that shows up? There's a huge model issues that we need to fix on. So this overall looks like, it jumped from January, February, but nothing major. Just if you look at that, right, from 2 to 10, nothing doesn't mean it's a huge jump, right? It's just if you look at the overall number of contingencies that RC West is running, more than 10,000 contingencies, right? And anytime you do make a model changes, sometimes you see issues, and we typically try to solve them and understand them. And if there's a underlying huge model problem, we work with the TOPs and fix that modeling problem. That's our process. Next slide, please. And this slide, this is the DACA accuracy, the day-ahead contingency analysis. As you guys are aware, right, RC West runs next day reliability study for the entire footprint, RC West footprint, and that results from that, right? It's normally it's capturing the thermal overloads and all those issues that shows up, right? And we do share those results in and post externally, and the TOPs get a chance to look into that and work with us to fix those if there's anything issue going on there. And this slide, it's generally comparing, right? Okay, we studied it in day-ahead time frame point of view, and we developed operating plans if there's any actual issue that shows up. Now the question is, how many of those issues showed up in real time, right? That is the key, right? How do you compare, right? It shows up. Okay, if it doesn't show up, then if the day-ahead analysis has shown it and it shows up in real time, that's good, because operators are already aware of it, because there's an operating plan developed, right? The TOPs and RC West operators will work together to solve that. That's good. But if it doesn't show up, then that's where I think it picks up our interest. What is happening, right? What is the reason that we couldn't forecast correctly, right? Forecasting is definitely it's a challenge, right? But we had to capture that, and we had to understand if there are any underlying major modeling problems, or are we just not capturing the flows correctly? Those are things that will this kind of information will help us. This kind of metrics will help us. This is really critical for us to make sure that the next day we have a accurate study. So part of this to enhance the metrics, to enhance the value that we're bringing here, what we plan to do is we plan to talk about this in the OPWG quarterly meetings and try to seek input from the stakeholders, input from you folks to see how we can improve any underlying model issues in the day-ahead timeframe, the day-ahead reliability timeframe. So expect to see, we have talked about the last OPWG, but we'll continue to talk at the quarterly OPWG meetings and try to improve the accuracy with respect to this. Next slide, please. So this one is more, this issue resolution progress. As you guys are aware, right? CD is our communication process where the TOPs have an issue. They open up a CD ticket and work with our customer service folks, and that issue gets addressed. Overall, as you can see, the green bar, it's a closed. So what this tells us, CAISO RC West has been putting more efforts on this effort that we need to resolve these issues more quickly, more on timely. So there's a lot of effort going on across the company to improve this customer service point of view. So you expect to see more actions, and that's why you're see more closed in the last month, and we have those meetings now with across the board, across the company once a month to look into this and any nagging issues that we need to solve with respect to the city ticket. So expect to see more improvements on this side because that is company wide we're looking into. I think that's it with the slides. Can you go to the next slide? I'm not sure if there's any other. Okay, so that's it. Are there any questions with respect to the previous 4 slides? Definitely I can take that questions now.
No questions on the line.
So we'll move on into working group updates. And Raja, I think you're up again with the FERC 881 AAR.
Sure. Thank you, Chris. I can do that. Okay, next slide, please. Again, yeah, I don't need to give my introduction. Next slide, please. This is, again, everybody's aware that 881 is the most important topic across the interconnections now. This is a major effort that impacts every TOP and every RC. So from a RC West point of view, obviously you guys are aware, right? We started a public stakeholder process. We created 2 separate working groups. One is the data submission working group, and the other one is the methodology working group. And we're also doing a quarterly initiative updates. It's more of a public updates. So the methodology working group is only right now, it's only invite only, and we have invited most of the TOPs, right? If there's anyone that is not able to participate in this calls, please do reach out to us, and we'll definitely include you guys in those monthly methodology invite only meetings, because that is really critical for us to have input from all the TOPs. Because it impacts everybody, so that we are developing our tools that works for everybody. We have created 3 tracks. Obviously, the tracks are designed to at the end of the day after 2025, right? December 2025, July 2025. All the tools in place from a RC West point of view to make sure that we are able to use those ratings. Appropriate ratings in appropriate processes. So track 1 is the real-time reliability applications that is in progress right now. What do we mean by that? It's mostly it's all getting the real-time ambient adjusted ratings through the ICCP and utilize those in our state estimation energy management system in our RTCA process from a reliability process point of view. So it doesn't impact any of the markets at this point. This track 1 strictly our real-time monitoring tools, right? Reliability monitoring tools. Some TOs already have that set up on their shop, but for us, we don't have all the processes set up in a way where we can actually we can receive the data, but we cannot use the data today in our downstream application. So we have working with Siemens to enable that process so that we can actually get the data from the TOPs who is available, who can send that and utilize the data in our downstream reliability process. Once that is done, We will work with each of the TOP that can send us the ratings, ambient edges ratings in real time, and work with them, set up a process, and get those ratings and utilize those ratings in our real-time application. So it is not required that everybody is ready by 2023-24 because the 881 total by this July 7th, I think July 7th, 2025, everybody has to be ready. So everybody has a lot of time, but if TOPs are ready, they can definitely, once we have tools, they can utilize that. Track 2, this is more, or we're developing our look ahead application, look ahead tool where we can receive all the 240 hours of ambient HSA ratings that 881 requires us to collect, right? That ratings will be collected through this process. Once the tool is ready, we'll share the formats and everything with all the TOPs so that TOPs can program on their side and start planning to send us the data whenever the tools are ready. The third one is all the look ahead applications, market applications. You know, this ratings, RCWest doesn't have market application. This is from a KAISO point of view, but RCWest does have a lot of look ahead applications. You know, the day ahead reliability studies that I just mentioned. We also run 2-day ahead reliability studies, and sometimes we also run 3-day ahead reliability studies. On top of that, we do run our weekly outage studies, outage planning studies, and those outage planning studies does have an hourly intervals that we study rather than daily, which it's an hourly interval. So all those applications need to be changed so that it can utilize this ambient look ahead ambient edges rating. So a lot of application will be impacted. So a lot of work on our side that will be done in a track 3. Next slide, please. So again, just to reiterate what this slide is telling us, right? The 881, it requires at minimum 4 seasonal ratings that every TO has to be sending. If TO wants to do 12 seasons, they can definitely do. I know some TOs in East, in fact, they're actually doing it. They're planning to do all 12 seasons to simplify this, right? Once a month, so they change. But it requires at minimum 4 seasons. So that's what we expect. Every TO send us 4 seasonal ratings when they're ready. Right, there's different process for ISO PTOs and RCWest TOPs. We're trying to change that, but right now it's a different process where they can send us this data to us. As I mentioned, real-time AR from both ISO PTOs and RCWest TOPs will be acquired through the ICCP protocol, that is ICCP. And then this new interface that we are planning to develop, that will be used to acquire the look ahead ambient edges ratings, the 240 hours, right? I mean, 10 days they mentioned. That ratings. Next slide, please. So we have posted a technical white paper that documents all these efforts, right? In detail, what are the tools that will be impacted, how the existing process is working, right? How we want to change it to new process. So all those, it's all on our initiative page. Right, I think once you have the access to the slide, if you click on the initiative webpage, there's a link there, so you can definitely go there and access all the white paper. And if you have any further questions, you can always reach out to me if any questions on that particular effort. Next slide, please. So again, we got some feedback. It does align with our goal of achieving alignment between TOs and transmissional rating methodologies and alignment of season definitions. This is our key goal because the way RCWest feels that if we don't have alignment, what kind of seasons, right? What kind of ratings that we have, what kind of emergency ratings that we have, it's going to be really tough for us to evaluate the system impact, especially on tie lines, right? If you have multiple emergency ratings going on, multiple different seasons, if TOs does different season across the tie lines, right? It's just going to complicate for everybody, right? What is the lowest rating that we need to? What is the lowest emergency rating that is a valid rating across that line to protect the reliability of that line? So more we expect to talk more about this in the methodology working group and get in alignment by the time everybody is getting ready with their rating methodologies. We want to get the alignment there. So there's some questions around what type of validation checks that we will do. So we'll definitely talk about more of those in our stakeholder groups that we have. Next slide, please. So this is an update on what's happening with the methodology. Are there any questions?
Okay. Bill, currently no questions in queue.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think I'll definitely give opportunity for us questions once I'm done with the slides. So this is an update on the methodology working group. As I said, it's an invite-only group. There's been some really good discussion, right? What are those exceptions for ambient adjusted ratings, right? The 881 definitely talks about exceptions, right? If there's a valid exceptions, why the TO is not going to calculate ARs on that, right? And we had a good discussion in the methodology group. I think what I've been referring to everybody is the NERC FAC 8008 standard is still valid. That trumps everything, right? So if that as part of that FAC 008, and if a TO determines that a particular equipment, the most limiting rating is the substation equipment, right? Right, so like line traps or those are in PTs, right? So those things will definitely be limiting rather than conductor. At that point, you don't need to calculate ambient adjusted rating on those, because even if you calculate ambient adjusted rating, the most limiting is equipment does not have that, and that will be limiting the flow, right, on the entire series line, right? So that will be so follow the FAC 8 standard that trumps everything. So as I mentioned, right, some of the terminal equipment in the substation can be most limiting, right? So like, breakers or cables, or switches, current transformers, jumpers, right? A lot of different equipment, right? So a lot of equipment there, so those things can limit. And also sometimes there's an operating conditions can affect facility ratings, right? What do you mean by, right? The open breaker conditions, whatnot, right? Those will limit the rating on that, on that how much current that can flow on that particular line, right? So those things you can use in exceptions. And that's why our goal is work with this group and try to get an alignment on what kind of exceptions we can use, right? And across the TOP under the RC West. Next slide, please. Yeah, so again, I think I covered on this. So there's going to be more discussion surrounding the tie line rating coordination. As I mentioned, right, tie lines are going to be really critical, that we all agree on what those limiting ratings are, right? Especially when we're doing ambient adjusted ratings and we have 240 hours of ratings. So we need to agree upon what those, how do we do the most limiting, and agree on that and monitor that and manage the system. So, but I expect to hear more at the working group meetings. I would request everybody participate, all the TUPs participate in that, and make sure that we all are aligned. Next slide, please. Yeah, and then the data submission group, it's a public group, right? We have been talking about some of the draft templates that we utilize to receive the real-time ratings through ICCP. So we also discussed the RC procedure changes. So far, we haven't finalized those changes in the documents, but once we finalize it, I will definitely talk with those group and make sure that everybody's aware of that, right, with all the changes that are occurring. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is our proposed solution for managing AR. This is the new interface that we plan to talk, right? There's been couple of discussions going on whether our CAISO or RCWest will develop this tool internally or hire some vendor to develop that. So we talked with the vendors too. So we'll make the decision here pretty soon. Once we make the decision, the overall flowchart is not going to change. The data is going to come in, how it's going to process, how it's going to flow into all the tools that the RCWest has. That's not going to change. It might just who's going to develop that might change depending upon what's happening with the vendors. Just flowchart where all the data goes. Again, as I mentioned, a lot of tools that RCWest has, and not that many RCs have. So a wide variety of impacts for us. Next slide. Yep, and ultimately our key goal is this new interface that, right, the TOs can submit those ratings that they own, right, that they are responsible for, and retrieve any ratings that they're submitted. So you can do user interface or web services, right? So make sure that we want to make it more user friendly, and definitely that will house some of the data validations that we talked about, right? And it will be certified, right? Make sure that nobody can log in that should not be logging in. So all those good things will be built in, but ultimately our hope is the TOs can easily check in, get the equipment that they have to send the ratings, and the second date they send it to us. The same thing, if exceptions are there, they can work with this interface to send us the exceptions that they're not calculating, so that we have access to. So that's our goal. definitely we'll talk more about this as we know in the working group meetings. Next slide. I think that's it. Any questions before I hand off to Tricia?
There are currently no questions on the line.
Good. Thank you. Thanks for your time. Yeah. Once you read the
Roger.
white paper, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just a question.
Sure.
Do you, how do you, or what are your thoughts on handling stability-based limits with these ambient adjusted ratings? So if there are any stability-based ratings, and as the facility ratings are changing, how do you intend to handle that?
So I'm assuming you're talking about a calculation that we need to, right?
Yeah,
that
perhaps you
basically-
have a voltage stability limit or a transient stability limit somehow, some way. And, that's typically, shouldn't be like a facility rating should be less than that, right? I mean, typically, but if there's any situations that might require adjustment to that, I don't know if you've encountered any of that.
Yeah, I think I see a couple of things that happen. This is not just stability limits. Even the TTC calculations need to be looked into, right? So if you right, as temperature changes, right, do we need to update our TTCs, right?
Right.
Definitely, there's different things that we can do from a stability point of view. One thing that we have discussed is, right, if a line is stability limited, right, and we know that whether it's a seasonal or this ambient ratings are not going to go below the stability limit that's calculated, then technically you could create an exception on that piece of equipment and say that equipment is a stability limited equipment, and that stability limit is way less than the conductor rating. And so you don't need to calculate ambient rating, right? Now, but at the same token, to your point, if there's a situation where the thermal rating can be below the stability limit, then that's going to be a problem, right? So we had to look into that. Now the question is that with the lower rating, is that the stability rating goes down, or do we need to, right? So that adds more complexity to that. But in general, overall, the stability rating, or either the voltage stability or a transient stability, right? You calculate that, and most of the time it's lower than the ambient intensity rating, right? In most of the instances, so you could develop an exception and go from there.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I think, I didn't talk in depth, there's if you look at about RASs, right? West has a lot of RASs. We are unique from that situation point of view. East does not have that many RASs. And what if a RAS as an equipment, right? Normally simple RAS that you trip line flow if it's certain limit, right? If flow is greater than the limit, whatnot. Now, if the limit keeps on changing, do you want to adjust your RAS with that? Can you send a signal to the RAS, or right? So do you want to take an exception? So a lot of discussion that's happening at the RC TOP community to determine what that means, right? How this 881 applies to all those things, because it doesn't 881 does not talk about all of those, because it's in general, but we have a lot of those RASs here, right?
Roger, Tim here. So yeah, one area we'll have to be careful of is as it relates to the Vic-Lugo I-roll, which is thermal limited, right? So it's not always in effect, and that I-roll may go away, but we'll have to come up with a practice around that. Same thing with our insecure operating state. The criteria won't change, but where we trigger those, the facilities may come into play quicker than what we would normally expect on a rising temperature and following line capability. So, we'll have to, that'll be a change for us in the way we consider those, or we have to be cognizant of those implications or impacts.
Right. Yeah, definitely, Tim. That's a really good point. Right. If it's a thermal, if it's the stability rating in that case is a thermal limit that causes stability issues down the line. So do you want to calculate real time, which we do? So I think we have to make a decision right now. Real time limit is going to determine any ambient ratings comes in, the tool is going to capture that and calculate, right? Then when we make a decision. So yeah. Yeah, a lot of policy procedure changes too for us, right? Now, at what point it's not an error, at what point it's not an error. So it just opens up more questions for how we manage that stuff. Any further question? Any further discussion? So yeah, we can definitely. I think we have my contacts. Everybody has access to. If there's any further discussion that you want to talk, right? Definitely reach out to me. Sorry for that.
Thank you, Raja.
There are no questions on the line.
Okay, thank you. So I know we're all talking about summer, but I'm going to make you talk about winter now. So probably most of you are aware that NERC recently released an alert level 3, which is I think the first of its kind, that listed essential industry actions. So we had done some work last year with the cold weather task force, and we're going to be reviving that again. Next slide, please. So just, kind of as a reminder, earlier this year, there were some changes that went into effect as of April 1st. And we've been seeing the updates with the emergency plans that have been submitted for RC review. We also had updates to our data request and specifications, and we have started seeing the cold weather limitation data rolling in. The RC 010 data specification requested that the data be submitted by July 1st. So we're expecting that we'll see even more rolling in on that. And the CAISO BA request for the TOP3 side was consistent also with the July 1st. So I would expect that probably all the BAs and TOPs are in the process of collecting that data now, so you can in turn get it over into the RC. Next slide, please. So the task force that we had put together originally for those changes for April 1st of this year included all of the entities listed here. So we had really good representation across the whole RC West area, from Northwest and California and the Southwest. So what we'll do when we start kicking off the task force meetings is we will reach out to those same folks who had specified interest in the task force previously. There's a contact list on RC Portal, and you can go in and you can verify like who's on there for your organization. You can add people. That's the way that we drive the invitations for the meetings. So please take a look and see who's on the contact list for your organization and make sure that your representative you'd like to be in on those discussions. We had also been inviting WEC. Steve Ashbaker was actually attending, and he also brought in a couple of folks from the WEC generator operator working group that were the chair and the vice chair on the GOWG. And it was nice having those connections in, because then the generator community had an idea of what we were looking at in terms of kind of direction and scope for the data that would be requested. And we did circle back and actually present out at the GOWG and WICIF, and also the WEC Winter Weather Readiness Workshop. So like I said, we'll get rolling with this task force again soon. Next slide, please. And you're probably aware standards drafting work is actually still in progress. So we're keeping an eye on that activity as well. But this level 3 industry essential actions that was just issued in mid-May requires attention immediately, and I anticipate it before the standards drafting work is actually complete. Next slide, please. And just kind of as a quick summary, in case you haven't had a chance to review the NERC alert yet, the first 4 essential actions apply to the GO. And what I think we're looking at probably for initial discussion on the task force is the data that we requested for submission by July 1st of this year. It doesn't actually change the cold weather temperature data that was submitted unless the entities need to adjust how they determine that, because the alert is explicit around the definition of this cold weather or extreme cold weather temperature calculation, the ECWT. So we will probably update our request and specification to kind of clarify the definitions. But if entities had already submitted data consistent with that definition, I wouldn't expect that they would need to resubmit again. But that's part of what we'll need to talk about in the task force. And so, these first 4 items applicable to the GOs, since a lot of you are vertically integrated utilities, I'm sure you're already looking at this in detail. Next slide, please. The ones that from the RC side that we'll kind of spend more time on in the task force are the updates for the TOP and BA EOP 11 plans, and then determining what we want to do related to the essential actions number 7 and number 8. So they're saying that each GO needs to provide information to the RCBA and TOP, and on the number 8 in particular probably is my biggest concern, because this kind of determination that the GO has to make about whether they've already managed their freeze protection measures or whether they've made decisions not to or whatever, it looks like it's putting us in a position where we're actually going to have to start collecting attestations or something along those lines. And I want to make sure we're really clear that if we're going to ask the GOs to attest how we want to collect that information, because I don't know that we would explicitly use it, but I'm expecting that later on FERC or NERC or WEC may come back and ask us for that information. So I think that's going to probably be the hot topic in that task force. And so for any of you that are vertically integrated utilities, just want you to keep in mind, start talking with your GO side so you can provide some input. I think our preference from the RC side is to ask the BAs to provide the information to the RC, because we don't have the agreements with the GOs. We don't have that reach. We look to the BAs to provide all the data to us on the resources in their areas. So somehow, since the BAs would also be expected to be collecting kind of this attestation type information, we would expect that to be a pass through to the RC. So just something to kind of keep in mind. In the presentation that's posted, there is a link to the alert on the NERC website. So you can go and look at it in detail, and then I'm sure your organizations are prepared to respond. There is a date for all of us to respond to NERC to let them know what actions we're taking. And I think, is there one more slide or is that it? Oh, this is the last thing. So this week we've been talking a lot about summer readiness, and when we were talking internally about how we needed to prepare and potentially update our own emergency plans and what our coordination and communication and things like that would be, we're actually probably going to look to the emergency plan and the playbook that we have on the CAISO side to see how can we adapt that for winter purposes, because a lot of the communication and coordination and preparation be very similar. It's similar forecasting processes, but it's just different criteria. So, and then we would also probably leverage our gas and electric coordination experience to see, what we've learned in the past for how gas type events and cold weather impact the electric supply. So that's certainly kind of our approach right now, is we're just kind of considering, well, what do we have existing that we can actually adapt for these purposes on the extreme winter preparation. So are there any questions?
There are currently no questions on the line.
All right, thank you. Next slide.
Raja, I think this is you again.
Yep. Thank you, Chris. This is, I think most of the TOP community is aware that, there's a new standards that are upcoming, especially FAC 011, FAC 14, IR 008. All these are related to what we consider an SOL, right? What we consider an SOL exceedance, right? So NERC has been working on this for the last couple of years and with different projects, and finally they came up with this standard changes to clarify, right, what we need to be doing, what the RC need to be doing, what the TOP needs to be doing when there's a SOL or SOL exceedance, right? And they have some more clear guidelines on, right, what those are. So what that requires is RC West has to update our RC SOL methodology. And what we're planning, we did is we created a SOL methodology task force that is there is a joint working group, RTWG and OPWG group, and Li Ching Jin from my team is leading that effort, and she is I think hosting a couple of meetings. Already hosted one meeting, I believe, and I'm sure most of the TOP community has participated in that call. So we'll work with the TOP community collaboratively and update the SOL methodology document. Once we update, as I mentioned, there's some language changes with respect to what is an SOL exceedance, right? What RC needs to communicate with the TOP, what TOP needs to communicate. It's not going to be a major change for us overall. I think we felt our SOL methodology talks about most of the things, except some of the duration, emergency rating durations, whatnot. So we're gonna once we update that, we're gonna make sure that maybe train or something like that, so the RC West operators as well as the TOP operators clearly understand what those are, what the expectations are, right? When I need to communicate, when I don't need to communicate, right? And what information that I can communicate to their operating system reliably. So that's where we are right now. Any questions?
Ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder, if you would like to ask a question via WebEx audio, please press the raise hand icon on your screen. If you are joining through via phone, pressing #2 will enter you into the queue. All right, I do not see any questions in queue.
Good. Thank you, Chris. And after you.
Okay. Do we have any? Our next meeting is actually scheduled for August. I think we're going to try and do that one virtual only. Just because it's kind of hard meeting in summertime, heat, fires, all that good fun stuff. But maybe if you could, if anybody has some ideas on suggestions for future agenda items, that would be fantastic. You can email them to either Chris Sanford or myself, or to isorc@kaiso.com. Does anybody have anything else you want to add before we close out the public session?
Hey, Chris, it's John Phipps. Yeah, I'm just thinking that for I guess it would be the winter meeting. So if that's around the October timeframe, we might want to look at, instead of doing maybe a workshop type of a morning, maybe do a summer recap and then even kind of a winter look ahead.
So like what all the utilities experience, kind of?
Yeah,
Great idea.
Yeah, and then that way the RC West can bring, what their recap of the summer, but then the entities can kind of share what they experienced, review any issues that arose, lessons learned, if they're available by then. And maybe even have this one in the Pacific Northwest, since it's kind of a winter look ahead opportunity. And that way maybe get some additional in-person participation.
That'd be great. Thank you. Before we close it out, any public comments or anybody have any questions or concerns? All right, thanks everyone. We will be launching the executive meeting next. I apologize. So in about 5 minutes, we'll stand that up. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.
That concludes our conference. Thank you for using Event Services. You may now disconnect.